Hey everybody, and welcome to the Not Just Another Webinar East Edition series. My name is Amy Bell. I am a program coordinator here at East, and today our Lunch and Learn is about the science of happiness. So we're going to cover some misconceptions about happiness. We're going to cover some annoying features of our minds that sort of get in the way of us increasing our happiness. We're going to talk about a few tricks to overcome those annoying features of our minds. And finally, we're going to talk about something that really, truly has an impact and increases our happiness. So if you're unfamiliar with East, but you've chosen to tune in, thank you. Here is a little bit about what we do. East is an educational nonprofit headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas. We put industry-grade technology into schools and co-ops and challenge students with other lifelong learners to go out and solve problems they find in the community or create service projects and figure out how to solve them using technology. We have over 270 programs spanning Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania, and we provide learners with the opportunity to have relevant, individualized, and life-changing educational experiences. So today we're going to talk about the science of happiness or emotional well-being. And we're going to hit on a couple of concepts of psychological science that help us to better understand our ability to be happier. But I just want to warn you ahead of time that this idea of happiness or well-being has been given an enormous amount of study by psychologists and academia. The topic is huge. It is multi-layered. And we are going to cover a little tiny smidgen of that science today. But if you find the information intriguing and you want to dig a little deeper, I'm going to link several resources in the chat. You can go check those out and check out more on this idea of the science of happiness. So these are my teammates from East, and I remember this day really well. Obviously, you can see it's St. Patrick's Day. This is the day that we packed up all our cars with technology and our office supplies, and for what we thought would be a couple of weeks of work from home. But as those weeks kind of changed and drew into more weeks and more weeks, this idea of this topic of emotional well-being really came to the forefront in our society. I was getting calls and texts from my facilitators, them concerned about their students. I was hearing from my friends and I was concerned about them. And so I think that focus on emotional well-being just really spurred me to learn about, to dig into the topic, and to apply some strategies in my own life to see what kind of impact these things really have on our happiness. And so I found some really cool things, some really cool ideas that I wanted to share with you guys today. I hope that you find them as interesting as I did. So oddly enough, I'm going to start out by talking about what does not make us happy, or what does not have as much of an impact on our happiness as we traditionally think. So these things are called misconceptions about happiness. I want you to think about what are those things that you traditionally believe will make us happier. I tried to think about those things too while I was doing my research. And amazingly enough, psychologists have been thinking about those things as well, and they've done many, many studies on the things that we think will make us happy. So they, just like us, I think they're truly interested in the impact of those things on our happiness levels. And without going into a lot of detail, I will just tell you that traditionally these studies attempt to measure happiness levels in the people that they're studying. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of how they do that with each study. My hope is to get into the conclusions of the studies with you, because I think that's the part that you're going to be most interested in, especially in our time limitations today. So what is it that makes us happier? Well, just a warning. The studies that I've looked at, the psychological science, the academia studies, they show us that many of the things that we say that we think will make us happy, they either don't or they don't have as big of an impact on our happiness as we think they do. Wow, that's kind of scary, but that's what we're going to hear about today. So, for instance, does having a good job have an impact on our happiness? Well, I found a study by a group of professors from Harvard, the University of Virginia, and the University of Texas at Austin. And so their study was on this very topic, and I'm greatly simplifying what they did here, but here's the rundown. They set up some college students with a potential job, and it was a paid job that most college students would think was really cool, and something they'd really want to get, right? And so essentially they asked those students to rate their current happiness levels on a scale of 1 to 10. And then they asked those same students to think about how they would feel if they didn't actually get that job. They wanted the students to predict how they were going to feel after finding out they didn't get this awesome, cool job that paid really well. And the students predicted that their happiness levels, remember they had rated their happiness levels on a scale of 1 to 10, those students predicted that those happiness levels would drop at least a full 2 points if they didn't get that job. Well, then they tell them they really didn't get that job, right? And the actual drop in happiness for the students, less than a point. So much less than what they thought it would be. Definitely a drop, just not as much as of a drop as what those students thought it would be or the researchers thought it would be. So these professors concluded through their study, and once again, I've greatly simplified the study, that a good job does impact our happiness, but not as much as we think. And I know that sounds simplistic, but it's not. So once again, if you're interested in the details of their study, I have linked those resources in the chat, so go check them out. So let's move on to another thing that we normally think will increase our happiness. Surely money will make us happy, right? Evidently, that is a common answer to what makes us happy. For instance, LinkedIn did a study of college grads recently and asked them, what do you want in a new job? Guess what was top of the list? Income. They want a big salary. And, think about the lottery in the US and the money that people spend on the lottery in the US. $70 billion each year is spent on the lottery in the United States. And just to give you a sense of what that means, it's more money than people spend on books, music, movie tickets, sports teams, and video games combined. So why do we do that? Presumably, it is not because lottery tickets are fun to buy. Presumably, people are hoping to get more money. People believe that money will make us happy, right? So does that bigger income really come with an increase in life satisfaction? Well, psychologist Ed Diener has attempted to answer this question. He has done several really cool studies looking at this correlation between income and life satisfaction. And basically, simplifying his results, basically what he found is yes, there is a correlation, but not as much as we think. His research shows us that the correlation between income and happiness, it really depends on whether you live in a poor nation or a wealthy nation. So Ed Diener says that if you're in a poor nation, it's true. As your income goes up, your life satisfaction goes up. And that's presumably because if you are super poor, you're not getting even basic needs met. But he concludes that if you live in a wealthy nation like the United States, you're really not going to see that much correlation between an increase in income and emotional well-being. Essentially, he concludes that while it does seem that income has an impact, it is mostly driven by the very poor, for whom this income bump, it means getting access to things like clean water and healthcare. So I found another study on this topic by David Myers, and he took a different look, a sort of a different look at this income/happiness correlation. He wrote a book called The American Paradox, and I put a link to his book in the chat as well. And he looked at historical data. So how the needs that we have met today are much better than what we would see 40 years ago. And he was trying to determine if happiness levels of people in modern day is greater than 40 years ago. So basically, here's what he found. You can see his quote on the slide sort of gives you a hint, right? He says, compared with their grandparents, today's young adults have grown up with much more affluence, slightly less happiness, and in fact, a much greater risk of depression and all kinds of social pathology. And this is what he describes as the paradox. Essentially, we have become way better off over the last 4 decades, but that increase in our lifestyle has not, capital N-O-T, been accompanied by an increase in subjective well-being. So essentially, all this extra stuff that we're getting, he concludes that it is not actually making us happier. It is not having the impact on our lives that we think it will. So one last study on this connection between income and life satisfaction. It's a somewhat famous science paper by Danny Kahneman and Angus Deaton. Both of these guys are psychologists and economists who won the Nobel Prize in economics. They were also interested in this correlation between money and happiness. And not just the correlation, but they were interested in the idea of a threshold. Like, is there a maximum level of income? Like at that point, you don't get any more of a bump in your happiness level. We saw with Ed Diener's study, right, that at the lower level, there is some bump. These guys were interested in like, when does that actually level off? And so to find the answer, they surveyed individuals living in the United States. And they looked at a couple of different measures of life satisfaction. They looked at what they labeled positive effects. So essentially, how much you smile in your day. Are you feeling stress-free? Are you not feeling blue through your day? And then they looked at how these positive effects correlate to income. And so the graph on the slide is from their study. And you can see income on the bottom of the graph. And then the positive effects are measured on the side of the graph. And hopefully you can see a couple of things. One is at the lowest income levels, yes, as you get more money, it looks like those positive effects increase, right? But at a certain level of income, you can see that they just level off. Those positive effects begin to level off. And they stay level, right? Even as that income gets substantially bigger. You can see the jump from $80,000 to $160,000 with no increase or very little increase in those positive effects. So the study says the threshold, or that point, what point that the increase in income does not bring with it an increase in positive effects, is about $75,000. So Kahneman and Deaton say, after that point, after you're making $75,000, if you're living in the US, then you're not seeing, after that, you're not really seeing a bump in those positive effects in your life. So even though our emotional well-being isn't going up after we reach that $75,000 income, we believe it will. Um, they've also found that this mismatch between how we're actually feeling and how we're evaluating our life, because we think we'll be much better if we're earning $200,000 than $75,000. But Kahneman and Deaton show in their study that this isn't actually the case, but our mind is telling us that we will feel better if we have that increase in income. So does money really increase our happiness levels? Well, from the studies that we've looked at, the answer is maybe a little bit. Maybe if you're in the US and you make about $10,000 a year, more money would definitely increase your happiness levels. But for a large majority of the population in the United States, Kahneman and Deaton say it makes much less of a difference than we think it will. So what else do we think will make us happy? This is my favorite. All right, stuff. If I only had blank, right, I would be so happy. If I only had a nice house or a convertible or those Air Jordans that cost so much, right? These are the type of things that are going to make us happy. And I don't know about you guys, but during this forced isolation with COVID, the Amazon Prime van has gotten to know my house pretty well, right? And you've heard the term, right? Therapy shopping, a little bit of therapy shopping. We buy things, we buy stuff to make us happy. So the question is, does all this really cool, awesome stuff really increase our happiness levels? Did my Amazon therapy sessions really impact my happiness level? I think you know what I'm going to say, right? Not as much as we think it does. From the studies and the research that I've looked into, the answer is not as much as we think. So why not? Why aren't all these really cool things making us happier, increasing our emotional well-being? Well, evidently, it's because our brains have a couple of annoying features that are tricking us. Let's talk about those annoying features. So annoying feature number one is something called miswanting. And evidently miswanting is the act of being mistaken about how much and what you're going to like those things, like what you're going to like and how much you're going to like those things in the future. And this is the problem. Our brains deliver to us this idea that we want certain things. I want those Air Jordans, but we're wrong about it. We are constantly miswanting. So, annoying feature of the mind, number two, is that our minds just don't think in terms of absolutes. So instead, we think of very relative terms. We are constantly judging relative to a reference point. So we're constantly judging in relation to stuff out there in the world, and it messes up our judgments of what we really care about. So a reference point can be all sorts of things. It could be someone else's stuff. It could be our idea of a good job. It could be how much money I currently make. It could be another person's physique. So these reference points are maybe what happened to us in the past or what's happening to us right now. So for instance, our current salary or our previous salary, those are reference points for us. So if you think about what salary or income would make you happy, well, it's going to increase depending on what you were making before or what you're making now, those reference points, right? So let's say right now you make $30,000. You might say, well, the income I need to be happy is $50,000. But if you are making currently $100,000, you're not going to say you're going to be happy making $50,000. You might think, I need $200,000 to be happy. So our idea of a good income, it is just not done in terms of absolute. It's always done relative to some reference point. And that reference point, once again, often what we used to make or what we're making right now. So you know what that means? It means that we are never, ever satisfied with our income. So I found a study about this by two economists, Clark and Oswald. They found that for every dollar that our income goes up, our required income, or the income we think that we need to make us happy, it actually goes up $1.40. So this happens every time you get a raise, which means every time we get a raise, we want to make more money. And as you can see that this reference point, it really messes us up. Because in our view, based on our reference point, we are constantly below that reference point. So my puppy dog is constantly looking out the window. You know, when she really looks out the window is when other dogs go by, right? Or when there's squirrels playing in the yard. She gets super upset, super excited, like when these dogs go by or when there's squirrels in the yard. Oh, but if she goes outside, then she's constantly looking inside, especially if one of us is in the house or if the cat is in the house. She's staring at the cat and barking at the cat and wanting inside the house, right? So my husband and I have kind of sort of made up this little scenario in our minds, right? That excuse me, that she's never happy where she is. She's constantly comparing her situation to someone else's situation. Reference point, right? And unfortunately for my dog, that she suffers from the most annoying reference point, and that's what psychologists refer to as social comparisons, right? That's the reference point of where other people are at. Evidently, we care a lot about where we stand in relation to other people. We evaluate ourselves, be it salary, possessions, abilities, beauty, whatever, relative to other people. And it turns out that comparisons against other people strongly, and I think you guys know this, they strongly influence our happiness with our situations. So our job, our salary, our possessions, whether we're inside the house or outside the house, right? And I found several studies on this idea of social comparisons, and I wanted to share a couple with you. The first is by those two economists I was telling you about earlier, Clark and Oswald. So they did a survey of 5,000 British workers in various jobs. And what they found was that a person's job satisfaction or how much they liked their job actually went down as their comparative income went up. Isn't that crazy? So what they concluded through their study was that if your income is less than the other people at your company or your organization or people doing similar job as you, or if you are actually making less, then you actually like your job less. They found that if you're in a place where your coworkers have a higher salary than you, you're necessarily less happy with your job. That's crazy. But even though the salaries of your coworkers, remember, they don't affect how much money you take home. That doesn't affect what kind of house you buy, what kind of car you can afford. None of that's affected. But Clark and Oswald say it still makes us unhappy. So the second study I wanted to share with you was done by two Harvard professors, Sarah Solnick and David Hemingway. And they did a survey among Harvard students at the Harvard School of Public Health. And once again, I'm really simplifying their study to save us time. But essentially, they asked students to pick between two job situations. Which one of these job situations would you prefer? So option number one that they gave to the students is you can have a job where you earn $50,000, but everyone else in your firm at your same level now, they're earning $25,000. Option number two, you are in a job where you are earning $100,000. Wow, you got doubled your income, right? But everybody else around you, everyone at your same level, they're earning $250,000. So the researchers, they kind of thought that most people would choose option number two, right? Doubling your income. You could spend much more of that money on your cars, houses, possessions, that awesome stuff, you know, that we think is going to make us happy. Guess what happened? Over half of those students in the study, they chose option one. Over 50% of those students, they chose having half of the income to keep from earning less than their peers. And the study concluded that this social comparison on income, it makes you so unhappy that human beings will do crazy, spiteful things like take less income to cause other people to get less money too. Crazy stuff. All right, let's switch gears here. And we're going to talk about another annoying feature of our brains that really mess up our judgments of happiness. Yeah, so I made a big pot of chili on Monday, and this is one of my favorite things to do. I love to cook for my family. They love my cooking, what can I say? And one of our favorite meals is chili. And I make it about once a month, right? Because it's so good. And the great thing about a big pot of chili is I can eat leftovers all week for lunch, all week. So I get really excited about chili week when it comes around in my house. And what I forget every time is that by Thursday, I'm sick of chili. Like it really is not bringing me as much happiness as it did on Monday. And this is a really good example of a phenomena called hedonic adaptation. Yes, and that's what happens to me every chili week. So I found this phenomena of hedonic adaptation really fascinating. Essentially, it's the process of becoming accustomed to both positive stuff, chili, and negative stuff, so that over time, the emotional effect that you get from that stuff, it just doesn't work as well. This is the thing that makes awesome stuff not so awesome, right? After 4 days of chili, it's not really increasing my emotional well-being anymore. And think about how excited we get about stuff. We think the more I get, the more awesome it will be. This idea of hedonic adaptation tells us that we are mistaken about that. The problem with all these awesome things is that once we get them, they tend to stick around. Just like the chili, I have it for a week, right? It sticks around. When we get a new job, hopefully we have that job for a while. We like to buy awesome stuff, a new car, a house. These things stick around. You get used to them. They become your new normal. And this stuff stops bringing you the happiness that you expect it will. I always think the chili will make me equally happy every day I eat it. But my happiness always wanes as the week progresses. You know what makes it worse is we don't realize that we're going to have this hedonic adaptation. We don't realize that our minds get used to stuff. We constantly think that the happy things that we seek out, they're going to continue to make us happy for a long time. We think that these things that we buy will cause us to maintain that level of happiness, but they don't. So we simply overestimate the emotional impact of things, both in terms of their intensity, in terms of their duration. And since we don't realize that this awesome stuff is not going to make us as happy as we think, we are constantly seeking out new stuff and constantly feeling like we need more stuff. So what can we do about these annoying features of our minds, right? Are there habits that we can put into place to overcome these annoying features? Well, psychological science recommends some intentional strategies to help. And they emphasize that word intentional because you really have to be intentional for these to work. Our minds don't want to use these strategies. We have to purposefully do these things if we want to make things better. So let's start with a strategy that helps with all three of those annoying features. Remember the miswanting, those reference points, and the hedonic adaptation. So the first strategy is stop buying stuff. Stop investing in stuff. I love this quote from psychologist Dan Gilbert. He says, "Part of us believe that the new car is better because it lasts longer. But in fact, that's the worst thing about the new car. It will stay around to disappoint you." So in addition to sticking around, it creates a reference point, really, like by which we judge what kind of car will make us happier in the future. And it is a source of social comparison. Do you judge your car inferior to your neighbor's car, to your friend's car? Of course we did. And then we need a nicer, more expensive car to increase our happiness. So this strategy sounds simple, right? Just stop buying stuff. But remember that annoying feature of our mind called miswanting? Our minds give us this mistaken belief that all this stuff really will make us happier in the future. And so we want to buy this awesome stuff. And that's why we have to be so purposeful and so intentional as we're looking and making purchases. So another strategy is to invest in things that are not going to stick around, namely experiences. So like travel, visiting museums, going to concerts, taking a beautiful hike. It can be as simple as like going out to eat or making up a delicious dessert and eating it right then, right? These experiences, they don't stick around. You don't have time to adapt to them. So this is another great quote by Dan Gilbert. I think it sums it up pretty good. He says, "A new car sticks around to disappoint you, but a trip to Europe is over. It evaporates. It has the good sense to go away and leave you with nothing but your wonderful memory." But remember, again, our minds mislead us. They give us the wrong feedback about what will make us happier. Our intuition is like, hey, why would I invest in a vacation? I could go get a car and that car's going to stick around and it'll be useful to me in the future. And my happiness levels will increase throughout the entire time I have the car. But in fact, the vacation being only a week is a good thing, right? That same thing with the meal. Think about the chili. I want it to keep going, but when it does keep going, I'm disappointed, right? There's no longer an effect on my emotional well-being. It no longer increases my happiness. Evidently, the things that go away are the things that make us happiest, that have the biggest impact on our happiness. Our minds should tell us that experiences will make us happier, but they don't. So we have to purposefully and intentionally choose to invest in those experiences over stuff. So I found a study by Leif Van Boven from the University of Colorado at Boulder. He did that in conjunction with Tom Gilovich of Cornell University. And they looked at this very topic, right? Do people really feel happier when they invest in experiences over stuff? So once again, I'm totally simplifying the details of their study. But essentially, they had a group of people come in and they asked them to think about an experiential or a material purchase that they made that was over $100. And then they asked them to rate how happy each purchase made them. And they asked some other things like how good of an investment they thought it was. And what they found was that people actually rated their happiness levels higher just even thinking about the experiential purchases. They asked if those experiential purchases contributed to current happiness levels. So even when you think back to it, does the experience contribute to your current happiness? And they found the answer was yes. Yes, the happiness levels were higher for experiences over material purchases. But they also wanted to know in retrospect, right? Did people think the experiential purchase was money well spent? And the answer was yes. People believed that money spent on experiences were a good investment. So they studied their data and they worried that, well, maybe that's just for people who are well off, right? So like if I have a nice car and I have a nice house and I have nice stuff, so maybe I'm at a point where getting new awesome stuff just isn't going to help me. So, might as well invest in experiences now. They wanted to determine if lower people from lower incomes, maybe these people don't have as much stuff. Maybe if they got stuff, it would actually make them happier. And so they looked at data and studied across different financial incomes. And what they found was that every level of income, those experiential purchases had a higher impact on happiness levels than material ones. So there are a couple of ways that investing in experiences help us to overcome these annoying features of our minds. One of these is simply thinking about purchasing different experiences. There we go. Planning a vacation can actually make us very happy, believe it or not. Researchers hypothesize that maybe this is another way that experiences help us out, that even before we actually have the experience, the anticipation, right, the thinking about it, it actually gives us a little happiness boost. And that is the theory that Amit Kumar and his colleagues tried to look at. So in a nutshell, they had people think about a planned experience versus a material purchase. And they asked them, how does the anticipation of this purchase make you feel? And then they had people rate whether it makes them feel pleasant or unpleasant. And they found that excitement levels are actually higher for experiences than material purchases. And in fact, they found it's almost 2.5 times as pleasant to think about the fact that you're going to go on this cool trip or the fact that you're going to go to this awesome concert than it is to think about buying a new car or an awesome leather jacket or stuff like that, right? They concluded that just thinking about experiential purchases increases our happiness. So finally, they found that experiential purchases make us feel more excited and less impatient. Wow. So remember how I told you guys I started out doing some Amazon therapy shopping, right? So every time I would order stuff, I noticed this. I'd be thinking, when is my stuff going to get here? I'm tracking it on the app. Why hasn't it gotten here yet? It's supposed to be 2-day shipping, right? I actually get really irritated if that Prime van drove by my house without stopping. It was bad, right? Kumar and his colleagues found that with experiential purchases, we feel excited, pleasant, but not impatient. And their study concluded that people just feel better to wait for these experiential things than not. So, but remember, our minds tell us this is not the case. Our minds give us the wrong information. So we have to be purposeful again as we look at those experiential purchases. So another reason that psychological science says that experiences are better than stuff is evidently when you tell people about your experiences, it's way more fun for them than when you tell them about your new stuff. It turns out that experiential purchases help people resonate with you. And so to test this theory, Leif Van Boven and his colleagues did a study, very simplified explanation. They had friends rate hearing about each other's experiential or material purchases. And then they rated their overall impression of that person after they heard about either the experience or the material purchase. So they described friends who talked about material purchases as self-centered and insecure. But they described their friends who talked about experiential purchases as humorous, friendly, and open-minded. So the study concluded that people actually think better of you when you talk about your experiential purchases versus a material purchase. Okay, there's a final reason that experiences are better than material stuff. The studies show that experiences are less susceptible to social comparison. We've already talked about that. It's a bad thing, right? Ryan Howell and Graham Hill, they're both from San Francisco State University. They did a study on social relations after experiential purchases. So they wanted to determine if experiential purchases make other people happier or just the person having the experience, right? So in addition to concluding that social comparison was less prevalent with experiences, they also found that experiential purchases just seem to make other people happy. Sometimes they said it's because experiences include people in a way that stuff does not. And sometimes they concluded just telling people about our experiences makes other people happy. Pretty cool. Okay, so gosh, are we to the end already? I know we covered a lot of concepts and information today, but I think we can break it down into a few simple takeaways. So takeaway number one is the things that we commonly think will make us happy may not affect our happiness as much as we think. Takeaway number two, studies show us that experiences are the way to go. Experiential purchases increase our happiness. It's in the science, guys. So after looking through all these studies and this data and this research, what have I done differently and what impact has this had on my life? So I've really begun to purposefully assess my purchases. I constantly remind myself to think about how I'm going to feel. Will this affect me in a positive way as much as I think? I have to say I've done a pretty good job of curbing my online shopping. But I've also done some other things. I have begun to really, really cherish and really be in the moment of my daily walks with my husband and our dog. I'm also carving out time to teach my son how to cook, and he is creating a binder of his favorite recipes, and we've enjoyed that so much. I am making plans for another trip abroad. My husband and I realized that we love to discuss and plan these trips during our daily walks. And we understand that trip may not happen anytime soon, but we're finding a lot of joy, right? Just in the planning stages. I've started cooking for my mom. Um, every couple of weeks. She lives about 2 hours from me, so it's I have to make the effort to go there. But when I do, like I'm really enjoying my visits with her. And like one of our visits, I gave her a facial and a manicure. We've enjoyed that so much. Our last visit, my son went with me, and we had a picnic at my dad's grave. We ate all my dad's favorite foods. It was an awesome, awesome experience, awesome day with my mom. And you know what I've noticed is that I talk about these things, I talk about these experiences quite frequently, and they continue to bring me joy. I think you could say I've drank the Kool-Aid, right? I've bought into the idea of the impact of experiences on my happiness levels. So I hope you will take some time to think before making a purchase. I hope that you will make the effort to spend time with your friends and your family. I hope you will enjoy your coworkers, even if you only see them through Zoom. I hope you will take the time to take a trip or plan a trip, and maybe you'll even let your kiddo make you dinner one night, right? But don't forget, additional resources in the chat. Check them out. This topic is huge. Make the effort to look into what all is out there on the science of happiness. So thank you so much for tuning in. But before you leave, we would really appreciate if you would take the survey. And we're going to put the link to that survey in the chat. Check that out. And let's see, our next Lunch and Learn is called I Am Smarter Than I Thought I Was, Arduinos at Home by our very own Aaron David. So sign up, or you can join us on Facebook Live at fb.me/East Initiative. You can even watch it later on YouTube. We'll put the link for that in the chat as well. If you have questions about East or possible partnerships, we would love for you to connect with us at eastlink.me/joineast. And to learn more about what East students are doing in their community, follow us on social media at the East Initiative, or visit our website at eastinitiative.org. So thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a great evening.